Have you ever thrown a pebble into a pond and watched the circles grow wider and wider? It doesn't matter the size or the weight or even the toss. It all brings the same change it goes ahead and creates in our world. Imagine if we thought about that pond as our life, and we put that person who threw the rock as each and every one of you in this audience has the ability to change our world. Simply because you set your mind and you say, I can do it. Today, I want to tell you about 3 individuals who made a slight change in the way they did things, and they transformed our world. How many of you in this audience are familiar with Emily Davidson? Anybody know her name? Can I see by show of hands? Well, I don't see any hands out there. Let me tell you about Emily. Emily Davidson was a lady from the 1900s, and she was a suffrage. She believed the woman's right to vote was critically important, and the Kingston Derby was her stage to make this happen. So it's kind of sad in today's world that most people don't even take the right to vote as something important, and they don't bother voting. But if it wasn't for what Emily had done, many of you in this room would not even have the right to vote. So let me take you back and tell you about Emily. See, Emily was around in 1906. She would do anything to get women out to vote. In her time, she had a rally and she brought 700 women together. Except back then, she didn't have Twitter, she didn't have Instagram, she didn't have instant message, and she brought these people out. At that time, they got tougher and tougher and tougher. And still, she fought because what she believed was that women needed a right to vote. She went to jail 9 times. And one time, she was so passionate because they were force-feeding her food because she just wanted to give women the right to vote that she threw herself down the stairs. She didn't give up. She said, I need to do something that's even grander than what I've done before. And so what she did is she came up with the Kingston Derby. You see, the Kingston Derby is a horse race that takes place in England. And in this derby, they had the king, they had the queen, and there was even King George's horse that was riding in that race. And she had a plan. On this big derby day, they're all dressed up. She decides she's going to slide underneath the railing and come up in the face of those beating horses. Well, you know, she did get hit by King George's horse. And it was considered that when they looked at her belongings, they pulled out this sign. You'll never guess what it said. We need to get women's right to vote. She died 4 days later, but this is what I want you to remember. 7 years later, the 19th Amendment passed, and it gave women the right to vote. So when I look out at you in the audience, men, women, I hope you're going to go out and cast your ballot in the next thing, because many people say it was that event 100 years ago that gave women the right to vote. And if we look right here, right now, we're looking at nominating a woman as a president of the United States because she decided that the right to vote was something that truly mattered. And she gave her life to it. I hope you'll join me in taking a moment of silence so we can give tribute to what Emily did. move to the year 1968. 1968, many of you might wonder what was special about 1968. There were three athletes, two African Americans and one Caucasian named Peter Norman, who took the world stage at the Olympics to make their stand. But we need to understand that in 1968, it wasn't a pretty year. If we actually think about it, 1968, that was a pretty long time ago. Wouldn't you guys agree? Definitely, a long time ago. But in that world, there was strife all over the world. There was race, and there was fighting. And we start off with the fact that JFK was shot and John F. Kennedy were murdered in the same exact year. We fast forward to that time, and the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, and 200,000 people were killed. We take it a step further, and there was the Bloody Monday, the absolute worst revolt, where there was 5,000 students and faculty unions that came out to support God. And if that wasn't enough, President de Gaulle went ahead and had 9,000 workers that were on strike, that he sent the troops out to quiet them down. And if that wasn't bad enough, if we cross over to Australia, they had their own problems with race. You see, if you were an Aboriginal, then you couldn't keep your own children. They were given to other families. And what's really horrible, it wasn't until 1970 that they actually changed this law. Now, but we have the Olympics coming up, and so I want to tell you about the people in Mexico. The people in Mexico were so upset they had their own revolts, and those students were killed as well. And the people in the Mexican Olympics thought, well, maybe if we just put it underneath the carpet, we'll just forget about it. Instead, what happened were these three Olympic athletes used the stage to go ahead and promote for the African Americans' right. And the guy who went ahead and lost was Peter Norman, the white Australian. So let me tell you how it goes. During that race, this was this huge uproar that this guy by the name of Tommy Smith and John Carlos were destined to be number one, destined to be number two. And the race comes off, and as we come to the finish line, Peter Norman comes running into the second place position. Now, we're ready for the medal stage. And on the medal stage, Tommy Smith and John Carlos had this plan. They were going to use that stage to make a statement for the Black Panther and the two arms and so forth. But they got to the stage that day, and listen carefully, John Carlos forgot his black glove. And it was Peter Norman, the shy, unobtrusive man, who said, why doesn't one of you put the right arm up, the other put the left arm up? And one small thing, I want you to look over on the screen here, and on the screen here, you'll see the patch. The patch he borrowed from one of the Australians' rowers because he wanted to make a statement of solidarity. And you know what happened? I'll tell you what happened. The Americans went home and they were disgraced, but the African American community came out and they loved him. Peter Norman never, ever, ever competed again. You see, in the Australian community, his crime was so grave, he was banished from the sport. However, if you look at his time, it surpassed the events in Munich, Germany. He would have won. There was a movie that came out on his life that was recently released, and it said that if he ever had the chance to do it again, he would have, because he believed that all people, regardless of their race, the religion, or the background, should have the ability to compete. One man makes a statement and changes the world as we know it, so athletes from all around the world have an equal opportunity to go ahead and compete. I think that's just amazing. But let's go to Montgomery, Alabama, and let's talk about a lazy Rosa Parks who uses a bus to make her stand. You see, Rosa Parks back then, she worked as a seamstress in a company, and she took the bus to take her ride back home. And on this particular day, let me take you back in history. You see, they had an area that was, this is where the whites go, and this is where the African Americans go. And if there's too many people coming on, then the African Americans need to give up their seat. Now the bus driver, he was like our team mom in soccer today. His job was, if there was any disarray, excuse me, you need to get out of your seat, you need to move over here. Well, Rosa Parks, on this day, she was just a little bit tired, and she decided she didn't want to move. She might have been put in prison, but they say that event on that day changed the laws of segregation. So as we look out in this audience and we see people of different races and different religions and different backgrounds who now have the chance to participate in society as an equal ability, we thank Rosa Parks, because she felt that she had just as much right as the other people had to sit in her seat. So let's take a look back. She didn't wake up that day and say, today, my friends, I'm going to go out and I'm going to change the world and I'm going to change history. Rosa Parks just did what she thought was the right thing to do. So if we go back, today I talked to you about 3 ordinary people, just like each and every one of you sitting in this audience. But here's what the 3 people did. Emily Davidson made a stand. She made a stand that allowed all you in this audience, regardless of your gender, to put a vote in the ballot box and pick who you think is the right one. Number 2, the white Australian made a stand. He took the Olympic creed that was race, religion, should not become any barrier of why someone shouldn't compete. As a matter of fact, he actually changed the way of the Australian government and helped them see what they had done wrong in his life, and they were actually admitted it. I found that amazing. And number 3, Rosa Parks changed the world of segregation. So I stand out here and I remind you of that pond we went ahead and we talked about. And as I look out at all of you, I want to ask you my one simple question. What will you do? Will you go ahead and take your passion in your heart and put it into the rainforest? Will you go ahead and help feed the hungry that's out there? Will you go ahead and help in the world of recycling? Are you going to be the one that helps that young child? Are you going to be the one that helps the parent who doesn't understand their student? Are you going to be the one that helps the teacher? Better yet, I want you right now to turn to your neighbor next to you, hopefully someone that you don't know, and I want you to exchange phone numbers and promise me that you'll come back and look at this video and discuss your plan of what you've done. Because until we speak the words of what we want to happen and say it out loud, it'll never happen. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to turn to the neighbor next to you and get their phone number so you can make a plan of when you're going to get together. And after the 30 seconds, we'll come back and I'll let you know what we're going to do next. Okay, here we go. Get out your phones. Go ahead and put on those phone numbers.
Already got my number ready. That's you guys?
So coming from my experience as a classroom teacher in the college classroom, I know that when it gets quiet, it means everyone has done what they need to do. So I need to give you 2 reminders. And here's number 1. Doing nothing is not an option. And so I want to ask you this one last question. What will you do? Thank you.